between your experience as an actor, which spans over 2 decades, I believe.
Yeah, if you count like my childhood stuff.
I count your childhood
Okay,
stuff.
great.
Yeah. So over 2 decades of experience as an actor.
Mm-hmm.
You also have taught or continue to teach at George Brown.
Mm-hmm.
You also teach Meisner classes.
Mm-hmm.
You also teach at another studio.
MAP.
At MAP.
Yeah.
And you've also done a lot of work, which we're going to get into this with The Performer's Mindset with Joseph Ariel Town.
Yeah, that's right.
Huge fan. I'm curious to know if you are at a point in your career at all where you feel like you've developed a quote unquote process, or if you've more just developed an arsenal of tools that depending on the job, but is there still sort of like a baseline of how you start approaching a piece, whether it's in an audition or if you've got a job that you've booked?
It's the second thing.
Okay.
It's the arsenal of tools. You know, you said you were talking about you being scrappy as an actor. I've always felt...
I tend to consider myself pretty scrappy.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I've always felt, and I like, I take great pride in this, that, you know, I'm kind of like, I've been a scavenger, you know, most of my life, and I'm taking what I can get, and I'm playing all these different literal roles, but even within the industry, like, you know, I've done craft on sets, you know, like I've worked in casting, I've worked as a coach, as a teacher, I've was a reader for so long in casting, and so doing all these different things, I've learned so much, and also I've learned that in the collaboration on a set, you sort of have to be quick on your feet to be able to see, okay, what's the vibe here? How much time do we have?
Right.
What's the flow of this process? And how can I tweak what I'm doing to do my best inside of whatever that is? Because it's different on every set, on every kind of level of project.
Just because there's like a different combination of people and there's different times and pressures when creating something. Is that what you mean?
Different. Yeah, exactly. Different times. Like if you know, like if you're like an actor, like an A-list actor who gets a role and you know you're shooting in 6 months.
Yeah.
That's very different than it's like the last thing I shot, I found out about it and I was shooting the next day.
Wow.
You know, and that's very common.
You had a similar thing with...
Well, yeah, I mean, we had to reschedule the day, but if everything worked according to plan, I found out that I got the role on like a Monday.
Yeah.
No, on a Tuesday, and then 36 hours later, I was in the car driving to set.
Yeah.
The amount of work you do in 36 hours to prep for something is very different than the amount of work you do over 6 months.
The thing that I guess has really become part of my process is taking the audition aspect of the work and having a different mindset around that, because that's so much of what we do.
Yeah.
And if you know, speaking of Joe
we're going to get into mindset.
Oh
bro.
yeah, well Joe would talk about, like, you know, you got to practice the way you play, because otherwise what are you practicing? Yeah. So if you're auditioning and you're utilizing one skill set and then you book the job and that skill set doesn't serve you for the job,
then what do you have?
And so what are you doing? If you're lucky, you're auditioning 3 times a week. That's a lot of great practice
for auditioning.
Yeah. But then you get the job and it's a totally different thing.
What do you do?
So I've tried to make my attitude towards auditioning really serve me when I book.
I talk a lot about that in the audition classes that I teach, that whether it's a self-tape and you have your reader, which I do think, personal opinion, everyone needs to be very specific about who their reader is, so you have someone who you feel like you can collaborate with, or if you've got a live audition or a Zoom audition these days, to see it as an opportunity not to prove yourself for 5 to 10 minutes or sometimes 2 minutes, but to turn it into a collaboration station. Yeah. And not just asking a question for the sake of like, oh, I'm just, just trying to be a smart actor and let me ask a question here, which I absolutely am guilty of doing back in the day.
Right.
But like saying, hey, I'm interested in this aspect of the character. I'm wondering, can we do it like this? Because that might be cool. And then you feel the energy shift in their eyes and in their voice because they get excited.
I think so much of my process when I was younger was like about having a process.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to be an actor, so I'm going to have a process.
So many people talk about a process, like you don't know what your process is yet.
Yeah, and then but there's so much performance going into pretending like you know what the hell you're doing. And it's just like, I've cut that mostly out because I think it's better for me. The truth is, I don't know what I'm doing. On day one, I do not know what I'm doing. When I have no idea. So to get humble, get real, and go like, okay, I don't know. has been the best thing to allow myself to do versus when I was younger and you think you have to know.
Right.
It's like that common thing I always talk about with actors of like, well, my character would never do this. It's like that was probably said by some brilliant actor
about something
very specific.
Right.
Once upon a time when they were doing like theater and they were in rehearsal, and they're justifying some piece of
and
text.
they've lived with it for like 3 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have every hack actor being like, well, my character would never. It's like, you don't know.
You don't know
You
that.
don't know who you
got this
are,
a
let
week
alone
ago.
who the character is.
You have so little self-awareness about yourself. You can't possibly be aware of this other person.
And
that's hilarious.
Whenever if you think about it in your own life, whenever you've been in remarkable situations, the kind of situations that people would tell a story about, you do unusual things.
Yeah.
You do not
Right.
behave like yourself. That's why it's interesting and remarkable. That's why you talk about it.
Yeah.
So even if you know this character, probably in this scene, they're going to be doing something they've never done before in their life because it's a unusual event. That's why there's a movie about it.
Right. That's why we're watching it. That's why it's been written. It's not just
it's
like
not-
a mundane everyday.
Exactly.
Just getting a coffee, get a coffee.